What if I told you that Mexicans and Filipinos share the same DNA? That buried in Mexican genetics is a 250-year-old secret connecting two countries across the Pacific Ocean. Welcome back to Mythos Amit Raj. Today we're uncovering one of history's most overlooked connections. How Filipinos ended up in Mexico centuries before modern immigration, and how their DNA still flows through Mexican bloodlines today. Hey history lovers, quick favor before we start. If you enjoyed today's video, please help me reach 5,000 likes, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story will change how you see both Filipino and Mexican history. For 250 years, from 1565 to 1815, Spanish galleon ships made an incredible journey. They sailed from Manila in the Philippines all the way across the Pacific Ocean to Acapulco, Mexico. This wasn't just any trade route. It was called the Manila-Acapulco Galleon Trade, and it was the first true global trade route connecting Asia, the Americas, and Europe. But these ships didn't just carry silk, spices, and porcelain. They carried people. Thousands of Filipinos, sailors, merchants, slaves, and adventurers crossed the Pacific and settled in Mexico. They married local women, had children, and their descendants live in Mexico today. Recent DNA studies are now proving what historians suspected. Mexican genetics contain Filipino ancestry, and the story of how it got there is absolutely fascinating. The galleon trade. Let's set the scene. It's 1565, and Spain controls both the Philippines and Mexico, then called New Spain. Spanish conquistadors had colonized the Philippines just decades earlier, and they desperately wanted to connect their Asian colony to the Americas. The solution? The Manila Galleon Trade. These massive ships, some of the largest in the world at the time, would leave Manila loaded with Asian goods. Chinese silk, porcelain, jade, ivory, spices from the Moluccas, and precious goods from across Asia. The journey across the Pacific took 3 to 4 months of dangerous sailing. Ships battled storms, disease, starvation, and the vast emptiness of the world's largest ocean. When they reached Acapulco, the goods were unloaded and transported across Mexico to Veracruz on the Atlantic coast, then shipped to Spain. In return, Mexican silver, tons of it, flowed back to Manila, which became one of the wealthiest cities in Asia. But here's what history books often skip. Who actually sailed these ships? The crews weren't Spanish, they were mostly Filipino. Filipinos were expert sailors, boat builders, and navigators. They knew the Pacific, they understood maritime technology, and they were essential to making the galleon trade work. Spanish documents from the era show that 40 to 50% of galleon crews were Filipino, sometimes even more. These Filipinos were called Indios Chinos by the Spanish, meaning Chinese Indians, a confusing term that lumped together all Asians. But they were distinctly Filipino, Tagalog, Visayan, Kapampangan, and other ethnic groups from across the Philippine Islands. Thousands of Filipinos made this journey. Some were free sailors earning wages. Others were slaves or conscripted laborers forced aboard. But whether free or enslaved, they all faced the same brutal journey across the Pacific, and many never went back. Filipinos in Mexico. When these Filipino sailors reached Acapulco, many decided to stay. Some jumped ship to escape harsh conditions. Others finished their contracts and chose to settle. Still others were too sick or injured to make the return voyage. Mexican colonial records document Filipino communities in several cities. Acapulco, the main port where Filipinos first arrived. A significant Filipino population lived in the neighborhoods surrounding the harbor. Mexico City. The capital had a documented Filipino community by the early 1600s. Church records show Filipinos marrying Mexican women and baptizing their children. Puebla. This city had Filipino artisans, particularly skilled workers who brought Asian crafts and techniques to Mexico. Guerrero. Coastal regions had Filipino fishing communities that maintained their maritime traditions. These Filipinos didn't live in isolated communities. They integrated into Mexican society. Historical records show Filipino men frequently married indigenous Mexican women, Nahua, Zapotec, Mixtec, and others. Their mixed-race children were called Filipinos mestizos in colonial documents. But Filipinos also influenced Mexican culture in surprising ways. Language. Some Spanish words in Mexican vocabulary actually come from Tagalog and other Philippine languages. Words related to clothing, food, and trade show Filipino linguistic influence. Food. Some historians believe certain cooking techniques and dishes in coastal Mexico show Asian influence brought by Filipino settlers. Religion. Filipinos, already converted to Catholicism by the Spanish, brought unique religious traditions that blended with Mexican Catholicism. Crafts. Filipino artisans brought Asian techniques in metalwork, textile weaving, and wood carving that influenced Mexican colonial art. The most famous Filipino settlement in the Americas was in Louisiana, not Mexico, the Manila village near New Orleans, established in the 1760s. But Mexico had far more Filipinos over a much longer period. The DNA evidence. For centuries, this Filipino-Mexican connection was documented in historical records, but largely forgotten. Then modern genetics arrived. Recent DNA studies of Mexican populations, particularly in coastal regions and areas historically connected to the galleon trade, have found something remarkable: Asian genetic markers that don't match the typical East Asian ancestry found in some Mexican populations. These markers are specifically Southeast Asian, and they match Filipino genetic signatures. One study analyzed populations in Guerrero State, near Acapulco. Researchers found clear evidence of Philippine ancestry in some family lines, dating back centuries. The genetic signatures matched Filipino populations, particularly from Luzon and the Visayas. Another study looked at Mexican communities with oral histories claiming Filipino ancestry. DNA testing confirmed these stories. Filipino genetic markers appeared in their DNA, proving their ancestors really did come from the Philippines during the Galleon era. The percentages are small. We're talking about 1 to 3% Filipino DNA in certain Mexican populations. But that's significant. It proves that Filipinos didn't just visit Mexico. They settled, had families, and their descendants are alive today. Here's what makes this even more interesting. Mitochondrial DNA studies show this mixing was primarily Filipino men with Mexican women. This matches historical records showing Filipino sailors marrying local women. The maternal DNA is indigenous Mexican or European, while traces of paternal DNA show Southeast Asian origins. Some geneticists estimate that tens of thousands of Mexicans today carry Filipino ancestry, though most have no idea. The genetic evidence has been diluted over generations, but it's still there, written in their DNA. The forgotten connection. Why don't more people know about this incredible connection? Several reasons. First, after Mexico gained independence in 1821 and the galleon trade ended in 1815, the Philippines and Mexico had minimal contact for nearly 200 years. the connection was forgotten. Second, colonial racial classifications were complex and confusing. Filipinos were often misidentified in records as Chinese, Malay, or simply Asian, making it hard to track their presence. But recently, there's been a revival of interest. Scholars in both Mexico and the Philippines are researching this shared history. DNA studies are confirming what old documents suggested, and people are rediscovering their Filipino ancestry. Some Mexican families have oral traditions about Asian ancestors who came across the ocean centuries ago. DNA testing is now proving these stories true. Mexican genealogists searching colonial church records are finding Filipino names: Santos, De la Cruz, Gonzalez, names that appear in both countries because of this shared colonial past. There's even discussion about acknowledging this connection officially. Cultural exchanges between the Philippines and Mexico are highlighting their intertwined histories. Museums are creating exhibits. Researchers are collaborating. The Philippines and Mexico share more than just Spanish colonial history. They share blood. Conclusion: the story of Filipino DNA in Mexico is a reminder that history is far more connected than we realize. While Europeans drew the maps and wrote the official histories, ordinary people, Filipino sailors, Mexican villagers, mixed families, were creating their own stories of connection and survival. Today, when you meet someone from coastal Mexico, particularly near Acapulco or Guerrero, there's a chance they carry Filipino DNA from ancestors who crossed the Pacific 300, 400, even 500 years ago. That's an incredible legacy. So the next time someone asks what Filipinos and Mexicans have in common, tell them this: we share an ocean, we share colonial history, and some of us share DNA. We're connected by the brave Filipino sailors who crossed the largest ocean on Earth and helped build what became modern Mexico. That's the power of hidden history written in our genes. If this blew your mind, hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, did you know about the Manila Galleon Trade? Are you Mexican or Filipino? Have you taken a DNA test? Let's discuss.